If you're looking to bring more realism to your layout industries, look no further than TullyModels.com, the home of Southern Tier Grain Modeler Supply and Steel Mill Modeler Supply. With models to fit steam, transition, and diesel eras, Kevin Tully has you covered with all of the components you'll need to take your grain and steel mills to the next level. Check out the entire catalog at TullyModels.com. Discover prototypical track and turnouts with the Roadmaster series from Oak Hill Model Railroad Track Supply. Proudly made in the United States, Oak Hill's handcrafted turnouts provide unparalleled detail and accuracy, giving your layout museum-quality track work at an affordable price. Whether fully built or in easy-to-assemble kit form, Roadmaster provides all the details of real track. Looking for a custom piece of track work? Oak Hill can help with custom turnouts, diamonds, crossings, and more. Check out all of their offerings on their website, ohrtracksupply.com.
ATLP Rewind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Joining me tonight, coming to us from the volunteer state of Tennessee, Campbell Rice. Campbell, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ray. It's an honor to be here.
It's great to have you here and great to meet you here. We've been doing a little chatting pre-show. We kind of found some common threads within the firefighting side of things and my past and your present. And it's kind of funny, the tie between model railroading and firefighting, doesn't it? There's just so many that do both.
It is. It's ironic that there's so many firemen that are involved in model railroading. That's I found that a lot of places I've gone.
I know it exists, but I always wonder why. Like, what's the common thread that ties the two of them together, and why does it seem to be so many? Because I know from my group of friends, Mark Herrick, Don Iris were both in the vault. Mark still is, Don was, and so many others that have that interest in model railroading. There's got to be something that ties it together. I think we have to do some big research on that to figure out what the tie is.
Yeah, that's above my level of geniusness. So
yeah, so we're gonna get to know Campbell Rice tonight. I've been given a little preview. Got a very interesting story of how your model railroading journey has taken you from a whole bunch of places around the country and now settled yourself in Tennessee with your Tennessee Western Railway. And I'm looking forward to learning more about that. But let's learn more about how you got started in the model railroad hobby. Where did your journey begin?
Well, I hear on your show that so many of them have family that's got them started, someone who worked on the railroad or their dad had a model railroad or something. And believe me, mine is nowhere near that. Nobody in my family worked for the railroad, and my father or nobody was into model trains at all, or trains, period. I kind of got my start. I used to stay with my grandmother quite a bit when I was young, and she lived right next door to the Gulf Mobile and Ohio Railroad. And I remember hearing the trains coming, and I just grew that fascination that I remember running to the door and looking out the front porch and watching those trains go by and all that power. Of course, I was born in '63, so I kind of missed the steam era, but I got in on the early first generation diesel area. And G&O was one of the most modern railroads, to start off with. I think we're one of the first that went all diesel. And I just remember those black and white, those pretty red birds, and it just stuck with me. And I've never lost that urge of trains since. So that's kind of where I started.
Where was Grandma's house located?
It was she lived in Union City, Tennessee, where I currently reside now. So okay. I used to remember seeing those northbound trains go up, and her words were, "Oh, they're headed to Cairo, Illinois." So I used to think, "Oh man, that must be a really big city." And then I was kind of astonished the first time I went to Cairo. I was like, "Where's the city?" Yeah. But no,
guess what, Grandma? It's not so big. Yeah,
it's not so big after all. I was picturing something like Chicago or something,
right.
But. No, but yep, that's kind of where it all started. Just watching the trains, and ironically, my little town of 10,000, it's a big railroad town, or at least it was. We had the G&O, we had the Illinois Central, and we had the L&N all right here. So there was plenty of action to watch.
So an impression from the prototype. When did model railroading start to become a part of your life?
Well, I remember being old enough. I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and the Sears Christmas catalog came. And I remember looking through the Sears Christmas catalog, and I said, "Oh, look, they have model trains. That's what I want for Christmas this year." And I guess that started my first model railroad. And I got the Tyco Sears, model railroad layout and started that way. And I remember, running my first engine. I ran it and ran it and ran it. And about 2 weeks later, it completely burned up. And my dad took it back to Sears and they sent us another one. And it kind of went on from there. And, I kind of just had it on the floor and played with it for probably a couple years. And then I got a little more serious into it. And there was a gentleman in my hometown here that I lived in, and he was a big time model railroader. His name was John Bell. And I went my dad took me up there to see his layout one day. It was in his attic. And I was amazed, a layout that was actually scenery and so big. And he modeled the steam. His railroad was called the Fret and Cuss. And I was really amazed by that. And as I was going out, I looked over and there was this 4x8 sheet with this N-scale model railroad on it. And I said, "Oh, that's neat. I've never seen anything that small and that size." And he said, "Yeah, I had a gentleman here that built it, and he moved, and he had to get rid of it, and I'm selling it." So I looked at my dad and I said, "Dad, can we get it?" And he said, No, there's not room in the house for it." Well, ironically, 2 months later for Christmas, it showed up. So that started my journey. It started off in N-scale. And shortly thereafter, I was probably like 12 or 13 by then. My dad finished the upstairs room, and I had a huge bedroom. I was so lucky. My bedroom back then was probably 30 by 15 or so. So wow. I had plenty of room for layout. So I built this large N-scale. My mother actually helped me build mountains and paint it and everything. So That's where my journey began into model railroading. And that's, like I said, it started off in N-scale. And I stayed in-scale for a while. Of course, back in the early 70s, N-scale, you were limited on how good it would run and in your power and cars and things like that. So, it had its issues, but it wasn't too bad.
Kind of neat that your mom was helping you build mountains and doing scenery work. Where were you getting information? We always talk about this pre-internet era that, I grew up in and a lot of my guests have grown up in, and I'll only guess that you obviously grew up in, right? And where was the information coming from? How were you getting things figured out?
A lot of magazines. Local drugstore used to carry all the Real Model Craftsman, Model Railroader, and the Trains magazine, Rail Fan Railroad, all those things. So I got a lot of it there. But, I became lucky because in a town of 10,000, you wouldn't expect there would be many model railroaders. Mm-hmm. But actually, I had 4 other boys that were my age who were also model railroaders that I had met. One was my cousin, and I had 2 others that were my friend, and one of them is still a friend today, and he's still a modeler today. We formed a model railroad club in the town. We called it the Oldbine and Forkadeer Model Railroaders. And we set up in our local museum, which happens to be in our county fairgrounds area. And we kind of built a diorama of the city, which incorporated the double track Illinois Central, which is the Chicago to New Orleans, Maine, just outside of Fulton. The L&N, which was a branch that kind of ran from Brewston, Tennessee to Union City, and the GM&O, which, ran through. So we kind of incorporated the town and some of the surrounding areas and made a model railroad out of it. And during the fair week, we would all come and run it for people that came to the fair. And it was HO scale. Mm-hmm. Of course, I was in N scale, and I'm like, I don't like this. So that's what started my journey, I guess, over into HO scale, which is where I'm still at today. There were several guys there. I know I must have pestered the stool out of them. But, those guys never never said, leave me alone. They always took me under the wing. They showed me how to do things. We had modeled a passenger depot here in town. And I said, I really want to help. I really want to build this. Of course, I had zero ability back then. And he said, okay, I tell you what you do. You go take pictures. You go take all these measurements and bring them back here, and we'll look at it and start you that way. So I did. I got my camera, a little Kodak Brownie camera, and some black and white film. And I went down on my bicycle and took pictures of all the sides and all that, and took a bunch of measurements and got the film developed. And, about a month later, here I was back with all the pictures and everything. I think they were kind of shocked because I don't guess they expected to get what they got. But, those guys helped me. And we built that depot, and actually it's still on my layout today. It was built in like 1976.
Wow.
So yeah, I've resurrected it and found it where it was stored currently, and was able to get it back, and I still have it. And the two gentlemen that helped me build it, they signed their name on the bottom, and I got to sign mine on the bottom, and I still have that little depot today. So that was a big introduction into, model railroading. Those guys really helped out, and that's kind of where I feel today. I like to help out the younger group and other people in this hobby, and that's what makes it work. You don't keep your secrets to yourself. You try to share. You teach people how to do things. And if I know how to do it and I think it's valuable, that's what I'm here to do.
That's an outstanding outlook and philosophy in the hobby of, if I learn something, share it with somebody else. And, I know my influence in this and the people that have helped me in my mentorship. And it's great to hear other people, how they got mentored, and then, being able to pay it forward by mentoring the next generation of model railroaders. It puts to rest the idea that the hobby's dying when you have people like that. That's what keeps it going, is the ability to just keep passing it forward and build upon the knowledge of the past and just keep adding to it is just an amazing thing to be able to do.
Absolutely. As we say all the time, this is the greatest hobby in the world. Where can you get people of all ages, old and young, together for one common thing and actually be able to work together and teach each other? It's an amazing hobby. It really is.
Absolutely. So you're spending your teenage years part of a model railroad club. You had a little end scale in your bedroom, plus you're doing the HO for the club and showing that off. Where does the journey take us from there?
Well, when I pretty much stayed with the clubs until I got out of high school, and I turned 16, and everybody says, "Wow, you kind of got away from the railroads, and you got into girls and gasoline and things," and that really wasn't my case. I turned 16 and I started work. I didn't do a lot of sports, I wanted to earn money so I could buy more model trains. And that's pretty much what happened. I started working at a local discount store and bought me a car. And I ended up at the railroad tracks most of the time. 2 or 3 of us that like I said, that were alike. We grew up, we'd pile in the car and we'd go to neighboring cities and watch trains or chase trains or whatever. And that pretty much went on until I left Tennessee, my small town here in West Tennessee, and moved to Nashville. And then I had a whole new world of trains. But I went to work up in Nashville, and I had an apartment, and I really didn't have room for layout, but that really didn't stop me. I would buy model locomotives, and I really liked one of the guys that was in the club showed me how to actually super detail an Athearn blue box. And I would buy the undecorated Athearn blue boxes, and I would go in and buy all the detail west parts and all that, and actually put them together, paint them, decal them, and put all the parts on them and set them up on the shelf and start another one. So even though I didn't have a layout or didn't have room, I just kept going with the hobby. So that lasted probably until I got married and I had my first son. And I kind of put it on the back burner then for a few years. But I pretty much stayed with it. Even though I couldn't model, I still rail fanned. And I would take my son out and even buckle him up in the car seat, and we'd go out and watch trains. So, even though if I didn't have a layout, I still kind of kept the fever.
Yeah, so usually, like you said, the fall off usually happens in the teenage years, but you were able to get through that and then right up to having a kid, and understandably so. The world changes when you start to have kids and you start to get busy. But it's great that you incorporated the rail fan and started to indoctrinate them from an early age with the railroading and the prototype, kind of like you did at Grandma's house.
Yep.
You put it on the shelf for a bit. When did you get back into the model railroading?
So I was, like I said, I was living in Nashville. I was working full time for a fire department, and my chief left and went to selling fire equipment. And I said, when I'm out traveling or on vacation, I like to go by fire halls and look around and check things out. I said, that'd be a fun job. Mm-hmm. And he called me one day and he says, hey, were you serious about that? Wanting to sell fire equipment? And I said, sure. I've never sold anything in my life, but I'd like to give it a try. He says, well, we actually have a position, but unfortunately it's in West Tennessee. I'm like, oh, well, that's not such a bad place to raise my kids. So loaded up the family and headed back to West Tennessee, So that's where I was. We bought a temporary house here. And of course I had to find one next to the railroad track.
Of course.
And it was a little small house. It was a little 2-bedroom, so I didn't really have room for a layout there either. But I kept the rail fanning going because I could go, to the tracks and I could see it from my bathroom window. I had a very good view of the railroad track, and my son was probably about 5 or 6 years old then, my first one, and we'd both hear the train whistle blow, and both of us was like run to the bathroom window to see what it was. So. We ended up building a house in 95. And I told my wife, I said, well, I want a place for a train. And it did not really have an upstairs, but it had a huge attic. So I went to the builder and I said, hey, what would be the possibility of, putting a room upstairs? He said, well, we could do it. The only problem is, we don't really have a lot of space for stairs. And I said, well, just put them here. And he said, well, that's going to take up a lot of your living room. I said, I don't care. That's just less furniture I have to buy. So there you go. I ended up building an upstairs area and started my layout. And it was a shelf layout there. It was a rather skinny one. It was only about a foot wide around. But and I started modeling the Kansas City Southern. So I don't know why. I guess just to be different. But that was the start of my first layout. I guess it was probably about 95 or 96 again. And I've built several since then.
So this first layout, the KCS layout seems to be, you had the club, you had the N scale in your bedroom. This seems to be like your first kind of run at a bigger layout. And yes. What'd you have in your mind for a track plan? Was it something that was just kind of build on the fly, or did you have an actual written out plan for the track work for that?
I have tried to draw out plans, and transferring them from paper to the layout has just never really worked for me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just not doing it right, but now you have tools. 95, we were just on the edge of computers.
Right.
So everything was still done with, paper and pen, pencil and things like that. And I just didn't have the skill to figure out how to get it exactly right. I had in my mind kind of what I wanted. So basically I just built the bench work around the room, and one side was a little wider. I think it might've been 2 feet or something, where I had a yard. And it just ran around, and I had a couple industries and things like that. I had a lift out section that I would put in to get in and out of the room. And I just wing it. And it turned out pretty good. It was probably about a 12 by 12 room. So it wasn't real huge, but it was bigger than anything I'd ever had in the past.
Yeah, certainly a space where you can at least get the trains and do some, fairly decent running in a 12 by 12 area. And you said you had some industries on there. Did you do any operations on that layout?
Operations? What was that? I didn't know what that was then.
Didn't know what that was.
So,
yeah.
No, operations, I had a friend or two come over and we'd just run trains, but we didn't know what operations was, at least not for me in the mid '90s. No, but we ended up selling that house. My wife, she finished her career, college, and got her degrees, and she started in the meat packing business and in quality control. And one day she got a job offer she couldn't refuse, and we ended up moving to Virginia. And that layout came down, and I kind of packed all my stuff in a box and put it up, and we ended up renting a house there, and it had what they call a frog. And I'd never heard that term anywhere, and I still haven't heard that term anywhere except maybe on the East Coast of the Virginia area. I don't know, but that stood for finished room over the garage.
Okay.
And so I ended up building a kind of a modular layout, basically 2 foot by 6 foot sections with legs that would all bolt together. And I put that in the room, and it just kind of made a little loop, and it had a small yard, just something that I could kind of go up and cure my cravings with. And that's kind of where I started. I'd been DC to that point, and that's when I started dabbling into DCC, and kind of got the bug there, and thought, man, this kind of opens up a whole new world. And I kind of got into DCC there. Of course, that lasted about 2 years, and then she got another job offer, and it's back to Tennessee into the Nashville area. And we rented for about a year, and we found a house, and it was the most beautiful house. It was my dream house. It was awesome. It was perfect. It had a room, again, above the garage, nice room for a big layout, and it was from my back porch to the L&N Louisville to Nashville main line was 52 feet.
Wow. Location.
Oh, absolutely. And my wife loved it enough. I said, can you put up with the trains? And she graciously agreed. And I ended up there. It was just north of Nashville, a little town called Hendersonville. It's not really small anymore, but it was just perfect. I loved it. And like I said, I ended up knowing most of the train crews. I would go out there, watch the trains go by, and occasionally I get stuff thrown at me. Good stuff, of course.
Oh, not the bad stuff. Good stuff being thrown at you.
I get good stuff thrown at me. And, I'd watch the trains, and they even had me on Facebook, and they would go, hey, I'm coming through. Would you look at my train and see if you see something dragging or whatnot? So, and even they called me one day and said, hey, we're just up from your house. There were some kids on the track, and they really didn't want to get off. So, it was really great. And we were there about 3 years, and that call came again, and we ended up in Omaha, Nebraska.
Were you able to at least bring that modular layout you built in Virginia down to Hendersonville?
Yes, I did. And I took it apart and built upon another layout there. It was a little bit bigger. So, I never knew how long we were going to be in a location. Everyone we went to, I kind of felt like I was going to be there a while, except for Omaha, Nebraska. And I knew I wasn't going to be there for a while. I don't like cold weather. I'm a Southern boy. So we kind of looked for any excuse we could to kind of get back south. And when we were in Omaha, they came to her and said, hey, we have this plant down in Russellville, Arkansas, that really needs a lot of help. And would you mind going down there and straightening things out? And we were like, oh, sure, we'll go. So we ended up in Russellville, and they said, oh, you're going to be here a long time because it really has a lot of problems. So I said, okay, well, we'll take the word on it. And it didn't really have room for layout, but I ended up building a garage out back. It was a 2-story garage. I parked my vehicle in the bottom. I had a little workshop. And then upstairs, I had room for a train, fixed up real nice, beautiful little place. I had my layout was probably 12 by 20 there. And it was also shelf layout around the room. And I did get quite a bit done there. Ran into a model railroad club there, Dardanelle Model Railroad Club. Those guys were some of the nicest I'd ever been. I typically don't like to get into model railroad clubs, but I did get into that one there. They were all just as friendly and outgoing as they could be. And we did have a layout that we used to take to shows. And we kind of got forced out of our building and it had to go in storage, but we ended up meeting at everybody's house and we'd all work on each other's layouts. And they helped me get that one up going pretty quick. And I, got it all scenery done and everything. So it was very nice. But they came calling again 2 years later and said, we want you to go to Minnesota. And I said, not going to Minnesota. I said, you're going to have to find somewhere that we're not being transferred every 2 years because this is just wearing me thin.
Yeah. If Nebraska was too cold, Minnesota is out.
Way too cold. And so we ended up in St. Louis. She interviewed for a job there, got that. And this was a St. Louis locally based company. So there was no chance of us going anywhere. So we found this house that we liked. We needed something when you do these company transfers, they want you there in 2 weeks. So you got to work it out. You work your timing out to where you can sell your house, get things packed, moved, and get into another house. And we were lucky. We found a house that was outside of St. Louis and in a small town south of St. Louis, about 30 miles south. And it was perfect. It was a 2-story house, but my father-in-law lived with us at the time. And it was a great house. It had an upstairs, had the downstairs, and it had the basement. And I said, okay, before we move in here, here's what we got to do. I said, I need these walls put up here. I need this floor painted, and I need the walls. I need this color of blue, and I want the ceiling black. I want lights all installed in here. So ironically, it all got done. And when I moved in, I had the perfect room for a layout. You'd come down the stairs. I had one room there, which is my work room. And then you went into another room, and I had a 53-foot by 18-foot section for a layout. And I built up a layout there. And in fact, if you look back on some of the What's Neat shows, you'll see where Ken Patterson came and interviewed me there, and there's video of that layout on some of his shows. And we figured we were going to be there a while till my wife and I retired. We were 10, 15 years. So I figured we had plenty of time to build the railroad. I got tied in with Ken Patterson. Of course, I kind of got in with him a little before I moved to St. Louis, so it was a great move.
How'd you meet Ken Patterson? Let's talk about that for a minute.
I met him. I had an invite to a show one time. I got out of DCC because I got frustrated with it. I got tired of the speed matching, and I got tired of all the. I didn't want to use JMRI and all that stuff to make things work. I wanted something simple, and I wanted things to just work. So I kind of got hooked up with a company called RailPro, and the nice thing about the RailPro is there is no speed matching, and you just dial it in and it just works. Because it's radio controlled, the second and third locomotives read off of the first locomotive, so they speed match themselves. And I was hesitant to go to it at first because the sound was so bad, and they ended up coming out with the redoing the sound system, and I think it's got some of the best on the market today. Yeah, it's got its drawbacks, and there's issues but there's issues with everybody's. Mm-hmm. And the fact that I can take my locomotives and my handheld controller, and I can go to somebody's DC layout and run my trains, or I can go to anybody's DCC layout and run my trains, because the signal is not coming through the rails, it's going over the air. So as long as it's got 12, 14 volts to the locomotive, it doesn't care. I could put a battery in the locomotive and I could run it across my floor, if I wanted to. So that's kind of how I got introduced. I went in there and I was on his show showing off the Rail Pro, and I made another visit or two. And when we ended up moving up to St. Louis, well, I just kind of became a regular.
Well, so you get to connect with Ken Patterson, and of course he's very well connected with his What's Neat This Week show and the work he does with model railroad hobbyists and all that. So I'm sure your network just continued to just exploded once you got to meet Ken Patterson.
Yes, and I'm still flattered today when I go out and somebody recognizes me and talks to me and tells me how that they watch the show and all that. It amazes me, the people that watch it and know who I am, and I am by no means any kind of superstar or anything, but I'm just glad to share my knowledge with everybody, and I try to bring something to the show, each and every time I'm on it.
Yeah, it's called quasi celebrity, right? And it's just it's very neat. And I love people that come up and say they've listened to the podcast, and it's just pretty wild. But it's more as fun as getting to know them and how they got connected to the podcast, and then they get to tell their story, and it's just a lot of fun to meet new people. And I'm sure you feel the same way with
Yep.
Through What's Neat This Week. Tell us more about this layout. So it's obviously drawn some attention. You're building this, and I've got the size of it. You got a 53 by 18 space, and you're running it on Rail Pro. But what are you modeling in there?
So I modeled the Union Pacific, and I didn't do any specific location. It was just kind of I just kind of made it up. But I don't like to say, okay, I'm modeling the Union Pacific Jefferson sub and everything has got to be like this, and like this. And when somebody looks at it, they go, oh, I know right where that is. And that just drives me crazy. I'm not one that can say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to make the scene. It's going to look exactly like that. It just doesn't happen for me. Each scene comes out of my head, and sometimes I'll do it. It doesn't even turn out like my head. And I'm like, okay, well, I can run with that, So I just kind of had this made up area, and I had I modeled the Union Pacific, and I had long main lines and curves and yards, and then off of it, I had a separate little area that would run off and run into a peninsula that was a kind of industrial area that I kind of modeled. Of course, I've always liked the Illinois Central, so I kind of modeled that was a kind of an Illinois Central branch, and the UP would deliver and drop off cars there, and then the IC would kind of come out and pick them up and deliver them to the industries, grain, and a few other little industries I have inside of it. And they also had trackage rights, so I could come out onto the UP main and go around to the main yard if I wanted to, and pick up and drop off. So yeah, that's kind of what I did. I ran long intermodal trains and long grain trains and passenger trains, and it was a single track for the most part with a couple of passing sidings, and it was a challenge because I would by myself run two opposing trains. So you had to time yourself out just right, and you're running two controls, and I'd throw one in a siding, the other I just let the main line go, and I'd run a short train around, and it was kind of neat because I could time it out to where they would pass on each side of the layout.
You mentioned earlier, I've heard all these other railroads, Illinois Central, GMO, and L&N, and all these other all these other railroads you've mentioned, but UP didn't come up. Why UP? What made you choose the Union Pacific?
I don't know. And even when I was in Nebraska, I started modeling the Iowa Interstate. I guess just because it's different. That is a niche little group of Iowa Interstate modelers there. And I actually lived on the Council Bluffs side. But I never really got a layout started there. I got the bench work down before we had to move, and I bought a few locomotives, but I never really was able to get into that. But I don't know. It just it just one of those things. I just wanted to pick a railroad, and I decided to model Union Pacific.
Yeah, kind of your own little protest of sorts, or just picking one because you want to, and there's definitely nothing wrong. I'm just curious if there was some kind of influence that led you to Union Pacific. But I'll tell you, if you're looking to make sure you can get locomotives or you can get rolling stock, pick a Class 1, because there is just a world of things. If you want to pick some short line that's stuck in the middle of nowhere, that's awesome. But be prepared to do some painting and decaling and because you're finding it in retail form is going to be a little tougher.
Oh, you hit anything you wanted, anything's out there for Union Pacific. So
right.
Yeah, it was not difficult at all. And I've always modeled modern times, basically. I like going out to the railroad and watching trains go by and going, I want to model that car, or I want that locomotive. And, I know a lot of people my age, they grew up in the 70s and 80s, and they want to put themselves back in that time period, and they want to model that. And I understand that. But for me, I just like to go out and see things today and go, that's what I want on my railroad.
Rail fanning can be a little dangerous, can it? And I'm not talking about safety, because we always rail fan safely. I'm talking about your wallet, because when you go out there, and that's exactly what happens, you start to see something or something new, or a new variant or a paint scheme that comes by, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm constantly that with rolling stock. And the neighborhood I live in, I model the Providence and Worcester and the New England Central. I'm real close to the P&W, and next thing you know, they're rolling something else through the yard, and I'm like, oh, I like that too. It's like, I've got enough cars, but I want that one too. So yeah, that rail fanning, it definitely is inspiration, but it can be also, very challenging to not have to buy everything you see.
Yeah, it's tough, especially for me traveling 17 states, because I get to visit all the hobby shops.
Yeah.
And I can't go into hobby shop without buying something.
Right.
Yeah,
it's funny, because I did road sales for a while, and I did this kind of the same thing. It's, it was fun to go in different hobby shops and see what everybody else has. I always had that hope that when you go to a hobby shop, and wherever the town it may be, that they always would have something of the local flavor there. Like if there's a regional, like they would have those models, but it's always fun to go into different hobby shops and see what they have and have that experience. And it helps pass the time when you're on the road too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it is still sort of that way. If you go to Dallas, you see a lot of UP and a lot of BNSF, power and stock, but
yeah, I
can go to Illinois and I see a lot of, Illinois Central and Canadian National and some of the other stuff that's, it's up that way. So it's not as regional as as it could be, but there is still some of that out there. Yeah.
It's also neat to meet new people in those hobby shops, and then see what's going on in that area as well. So kind of, that's neat. Another thing that we share in common. Love to pop into there, and then love the rail fan. And imagine at 17 states, the rail fanning opportunities that you've had is just incredible.
Oh yeah. I cover from West Virginia to El Paso, Texas, basically.
Wow.
And North Dakota, down to Texas. So I've got quite a bit of territory, and typically I drive. I don't fly, because I have to carry too much equipment, and you can't carry it with you on a plane. And I don't like to fly anyways. If I can get away from it, if I'm just going for a meeting or something, yeah, I'll fly. But typically I'm going out and with my customers and going out to see their customers, and I have to carry product to show. So I ended up driving, and your podcast take me through a lot quicker, believe me.
Well, it's fun to ride along with you with the podcast, and boy, I wish I was there, because boy, imagine the railroading. And I can just, when I was doing road sales, I was doing the same thing. I'd always carry my cameras with me, taking photos. I had all the New England and trying to in half of New York State, had a lot of opportunities to stop. But boy, you've got a lot bigger railroads. I would love to be able to have a territory like that. I imagine it's very challenging to be on the road that much, but the reward being able to see what you get to see along the way.
Absolutely. And Railfan Motels or whatever it is, .net or whatever, I can't remember the name of that site, is always a big help. Because if I'm going to a location, that's the first thing I'm going to pull up is I'm going to see what hotels are near the railroad track or near, whatever. Even though I'm on the road, I have these certain hotels that I stay at. I have my certain block of rooms I like to go to, and if I can get in a hotel that's near a railroad track or a railroad track view, that's always my first choice.
The internet has everything if you keep looking. You said Railfan Motels. I'm trying to find it. It looks like the site might be down.
Yeah, I think it's down temporarily. It's been down for like a month or two, but I've helped, contribute to some of that. Gentleman that runs that, on his side has got his hands full with it. But yeah, I've got my select hotels, and thanks to Google Maps, if I'm going, the first thing I'm going to do is pull up the town and punch in the hotels and look at where they're, if there is anywhere near any Railfan spots or whatever. So, I'm traveling. I've got to have my perks. That's just the way it is.
You and I think so much alike. It's amazing. This is exactly what I would do. Okay, where's this hotel? Where can I go Railfan afterwards? And I hated traveling in the winter because it got dark early.
Yeah.
At least I could get my, sales calls in during the day. And then I could get out there before the sunset, get some golden hour shots.
Absolutely.
And then get back to the hotel and, or maybe I just hang out trackside for a while or pull up my laptop and work from the car, sitting trackside somewhere. So
many times. Yes, you're right. The winter is kind of bad because of that. But, the summer times when it's daylight till to 9 o'clock or so, it's great. Even though I may be sitting there sweating trackside, it's still fun.
So of all the travel you've done, and you've 17 states you mentioned, and of course you've lived in several locations, if I were to hand you a plane ticket or even just say, here's some gas money, sounds like you'd rather drive anyway, and I don't blame you, where would you go? What is your favorite place to Railfan?
Oh boy. Good question. Oh, I don't know. There's just so many places. I don't know if it'd be down in Georgia or Texas or Rochelle. There are so many great Railfan spots out there. It would be really hard to just narrow down one.
Yeah, I hear you. I was thinking, I'm asking that question. I'm thinking how I would answer it myself, and
I guess if I had to, I guess I would just come up with Santa Fe Junction in Kansas City.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
It is probably a place that you can go where you can just about see a train every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
There's enough action there to keep it interesting. And that's probably my number one Railfan location, I would say.
Yeah, that's where, when you get to see that traffic, and I've been to some spots that are beautiful spots, but no traffic. And, of course we've seen traffic diminish, especially up here in the Northeast, that dreaded precision scheduled railroading that's reduced the amount of trains, and Selkirk isn't what it used to be up here in the Northeast. But yeah, it's great to be able to travel and to go see somewhere where there's just an expressway worth of trains to catch.
And if I like to photograph it, that probably would not be my ideal location, because I want to photograph in a scenic area. I don't want just your ordinary picture. Right. When I photograph a train, I like to be in a real scenic area. I like for them to see the train, but also take everything around it as well.
Right. So let's get back to this Union Pacific layout, 53 foot by 18 foot in St. Louis, and you're building yourself a great network. How far did you get in complete? Did you complete that layout, or did you get, where were you at it?
No, I got to the point where I had about half the scenery done, about half of the ballasting. I would say a little over half probably. And then an unfortunate series of things happened where January of 21, I was unfortunately I was out of town, and my wife called. She says, "I think I've just had a stroke."
Oh boy.
And life changes, just like that. And
Sure does.
it made a total difference in the way we look at things now. So we couldn't stay there. I did not have family there. I didn't have anybody close that if she needed somebody, she fell or whatever, that could come take care of her. It was, had an upstairs, had the basement, and she just couldn't do the stairs. So April of 21, we ended up selling that house, and I moved back here to Northwest Tennessee, and I live 2 blocks from my mother now, and I've still got lots of good friends here. I don't hesitate being out of town. I know I can pick up the phone and make one phone call, and people would be here just instantly.
Right.
So it's a good, comforting feeling. When we sold our house up there, and trying to find a place here, it's a small town. It's about 10,000 people, and the houses I looked at were probably hadn't been touched since the 60s, and I didn't want a fix-up project. I wanted something move-in ready, something perfect that was, done. I had some high standards here.
Yep.
I wanted to be fairly close to my fire department and fairly close to my mother. And by the grace of God, I got a house that had just been totally flipped, and it just worked perfect. We downsized from 4,200 square feet down to 1,600 square feet.
Yep.
So there was a lot of stuff gotten rid of, a lot of stuff sold.
Yep.
But we made it work, and I like where we're at now. It like I said, it's just been completely redone, and that made things easier on her to make the move, knowing that all she had to do was just come in and put her furniture in, and everything was all on one level. However, the drawback was, since I do work from home and we have a 3-bedroom house, I have to take one room for an office.
Right.
And of course, I do need a spare bedroom in case one of my boys and their families come in.
Yep.
And that left me with no place for a train. And in Tennessee, we're like Texas. We don't have basements here in this part of West Tennessee. People think of Tennessee and the mountains and how pretty it is. And West Tennessee is not that way. It's flat farmland, cotton, soybeans, corn, and the water table is just too high. And, we're only, as the crow flies, probably about 15, 20 miles from the Mississippi River. So
right.
I had to do something. So my wife was upset that I had to take my layout down. She knows the passion that I have for the hobby. And she said, well, I want a screen porch. And I said, well, I want a room for a layout. So I got to looking, and one day I came to her with this proposal. I said, okay, honey, how about if you get your screen porch and I get my building for my layout? She says, okay, how do you plan on doing that? So I said, I found a portable building, a company that'll make a portable building, and I asked them how big they could make it. And they said 40 by 14. And I said, okay, can you make a 10-foot porch on it? And they said, well, yeah, I guess we could. So I hit her up with this. I said, okay, here's your 10-foot porch. I'll screen it in for you. And if you'll let me have the 30 by 14 for my layout. And she graciously agreed, and I had the building built, and they brought it in and set up the base for it and put it into place, and I built the screen porch first, got all that done.
Yep.
And I wired it. I kind of wanted it to look. Of course, our house here is white, and with a black roof. So it's white with a black roof, and I kind of wanted it to look like a freight depot. So it kind of looks like a freight depot with a deck built around it, which is almost like a dock for, where they would come in and unload.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as close as I could get. I put some, downlights on it, so it kind of looks like a freight depot. And I went in and I did the wiring, so I knew where I wanted all the wiring to be, where I wanted plugs, and best thing I ever did on it was I had them to come in and do this closed spray foam insulation in the entire building. And I put a mini split in, and then I had somebody to do the sheetrock for me. So it's buttoned up tight, and it I think last year when it got down to 3 or 4 below zero, which is really cold here.
Yeah.
I think it stayed about 58, 59 in there. And
that's perfect.
That's as cold as it's ever gotten. But typically, here, that'll only be that way 2 or 3 days. So, we'll get 100 or so in the summertime, but the building, it's like an igloo cooler. It stayed nice and cool in the summertime. No problem with the air whatsoever. And typically during the wintertime, when we're at our averages, lows in the 20s, maybe the teens occasionally, it stays just fine. So I had a blank canvas to start all over again. And
a master negotiator. You were able to get her porch that she was looking for, along with a building for your railroad on it, all tied into one project. You can't plan it better than that.
So I was real glad. So here I am back to the drawing board again, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I want to do this time? And I decided I didn't want another lift out. I didn't want a duck under. I figured maybe at some point I may be too old to duck under. So, I'm not a person that really likes to watch trains run in circles. The real trains don't run in circles. I didn't want my train to run in circles.
Right.
And I decided I'm going to do a point to point. So it came down to, all right, well, what route am I going to model? And so the Union Pacific was sort of kind of out. Ended up selling most of my UP locomotives. And I said, okay, let's Chris Palmero just kind of got me started to thinking this, with starting my own little freelance. And I said, that's kind of intriguing. Then I can kind of create what I want in my head and make my own scenes.
Right.
And it's, you kind of have to be creative there, and coming up with my own paint schemes and my own designs was probably part of the fun part there.
Yeah.
And so if you kind of look at it, it looks like a W. So it's 30 feet down, 14 across with that center peninsula. If you were looking at it, to the north, when you come in the door, on the right-hand side is my main yard. And this is basically what I model is the Illinois Central kind of seeing kind of thing. It's not a main line, so to speak. It's kind of a secondary main line that branches off of a main line that comes into they have a small yard there, and then they go on out. And at the north end, there's a switch that comes off of that Illinois Central main line that became the Tennessee Western. I couldn't do the West Tennessee Railroad because there is a West Tennessee Railroad. So I came up with the Tennessee Western, and it's just my fictional railroad. So I say what this was it was all original Illinois Central track that was not being serviced as well as it should be. And there was talk about it being up for abandonment. And there was one key industry on my model railroad that relied strictly on rail service, and that was a tank car cleaning facility. Mm-hmm. If the Illinois Central would have abandoned this line, then this company would have been out of business. So there was a group of people that got together that had industry there and went and approached the county, which approached other multiple counties and said, let's buy this railroad from the Illinois Central and we'll title it Tennessee Western Railway Authority, or TWRA for short, which also happens to stand for Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. But so that's what I came up with, Tennessee Western Railway Authority. And so this was started. My fictional time period is about 2000. And since that time, they have improved service. We now have a large grain elevator service there, plastic facilities. The tank car cleaning business is thriving well. I have a frozen food company now that is relying more on rail service. I have some wood industry that takes trees and makes them into plywood and planks. And then at the far end, if you consider on the west side, if you're still looking north, back up at the front is where the Tennessee Western Yard is. So it's the end of the line. So I can start on that end with my power, and I can work my way around. I've got kind of a little S-curve, which I brought that from my layout that I did in Arkansas, which transferred to St. Louis, which is transferred here. Yep. Unfortunately, out of that St. Louis layout, I was really only able to save two of my sections. The others just wouldn't fit properly in my building. So it basically started off from scratch. But I have an S-curve that I saved, and I have a bridge scene going under a river with a boat ramp that I was able to salvage and bring over here as well. So those two were able to incorporate in my layout. But I can work my way through all the industry. The largest city on the layout is Campbellsville, remarkably. Yep. And I have a downtown area, and it's at the bottom of the W. It's in the area that it's hard to reach. And so I don't have track in that area. I have the downtown area, but you can reach it. It's just a stretch, but there shouldn't be anything there that I have to touch. And it can work around and loop around and then work back to the switch on the corner there where it meets the IC, and they do have trackage rights into the main yard. And I have like a 5-track yard. So they'll bring their trains in, set it out, go in and pick up. The Illinois Central will set out in an adjacent track, the Tennessee Western's cars going out. And so I can pick up the Tennessee Western cars and then work my way back and deliver those cars. So you asked me about operations earlier. Yeah. So this is kind of where it's going. I have set it up to where you can run operations on this railroad. Once I get things going, I'll be able to have about 3 operators working in pairs of 2. One is an engineer, one is a conductor, and one will work the Illinois Central Yard preparing the cars for setting out that day for the Tennessee Western. One can be working the industrial yard with the grain elevators and getting things like that set up. And the other can be working the Tennessee Western run that starts from the Tennessee Western Yard, goes around and picks up and makes its way over to the Illinois Central Yard. So I haven't put it to test yet, but eventually one day I hope to. Ironically, here in town, I've probably got about 4 or 5 other model railroaders. So one of these days, I'm going to get that going with the computer system and pull those car cards and hopefully have an operating session. So I've never attended an operating session, so I don't know whether I'm going to be doing it right or not. That is on my bucket list. So maybe one of these days I can go somewhere where they're having an operating session and learn how to do it.
One of the things that's been really neat for me in the podcast, and I can say one of the things I've learned, of all the things I've learned, the ones that really fascinate me is freelance model railroading. And it started with Chris Palmieri, like it started with him inspiring you to go freelance. And what I've learned about freelance and watching you tell your story, just how excited you get and how into your story you are that you've developed this. And I can probably imagine a lot of this happened during what we call windshield time, all that traveling time, staring at that glass. You start to be able to think about these things and start to run scenarios through your head and think about industries and ops scenarios and all these other different things. So it's just amazing to see that. And it's got me really inspired thinking about the freelance and the different ways it's done, whether you're doing it full freelance like you're talking about, or if you are like John Parker, you picked a class 1 but built a layout that's freelance. It's just it's such a neat world to me to see the imagination, and it's really inspiring and kind of hits on a lot of these neat things that you get to do with freelance, create logos and build the story and the things that you've been able to do with the Tennessee Western.
Yes. So hopefully one of these days soon, I'll be able to produce my own cars for everybody. Hint, Chris.
Chris, are you listening, Chris?
So,
yeah, that's a great scheme. You come up with a great logo and fascinating and in a great space. I mean, what do you have? I guess the working space would be 30 by 14.
That's correct. Yep. And I have a desk in there where I can sit down and do all my model work, and underneath the bench work, I have a paint booth. It's vented outside, so I can do all my painting in there without choking out. And it's a great little space. It's all I need. And I thought about doing a double decker layout, and I said no. I've done that big layout, and I know how much track I have to ballast already. So. Right. And I'm one that's real particular. Pelle Solberg and Lance Mannheim are my two favorite idols. And I try to make it look, as realistic as possible. I don't want a layout that looks toyish.
Right.
And, it's got me down to where I paint individual ties, I have that obsession. And then, the ballasting, to me has to look right. I want it done just right. So, it takes me a while. And like I said, I've been working on this layout. Well, it'll be, I guess since I started my bench work, it's probably going to be a year this coming February. We'll have been up a year, but, all track work is down. All wiring is done. Currently I'm down into ballasting and scenery.
Wow, it's pretty amazing you got that done. After all these moves and all this travel all over the place, homes in many different places, and now you get to settle down in Western Tennessee with your outbuilding, with a nice porch for the wife to sit in her screen porch while you're inside doing your modeling and both enjoying life. And fantastic story to share with us on around the layout. So as we wrap this up, where can folks find out more about your modeling and follow along as you're building the Tennessee Western Railway?
Well, I do have a Facebook page. It's called Campbell's Railroad Modeling. And I also have a YouTube channel by that name as well. If I do a video, lots of times I'll post it on that channel. I do some how-tos. I just did one not too long ago on a little wiring trick that I did. I've got one coming up on some homemade ballast trick. But I guess I try to post something every week on the Facebook page, whether it's just showing a little this or a little that or a scene that I did. But that's the two main places. I'm not a big video editor. I'm not that great at it. I know enough just to get by, and sometimes, I'll do a video and put it up there, but I probably should put more. But as anybody that does videos knows that it takes time, and it's a job to put those videos together and put them out there. And I applaud anybody that is able to do that quite regularly, because it's, it takes a lot of time away from the hobby. And with my job traveling as much as I do, I love to come home and try to work on the train. And the last thing I want to do is spend hours doing a video. But I understand people like to see it and want to see it. So, I'll pop a few out there every now and then.
Yeah, it becomes a hobby within the hobby. And boy, can I tell you all about that with the podcast and everything else. But great that you're sharing it. And we'll put all the links to your Facebook page and the YouTube channel in the notes, into the show notes. Campbell, it's been awesome hearing your model railroading story here on Around the Layout. Thanks for coming by and telling us.
Well, thank you. Like I said, it was an honor to be here. Keep up the good work. And I'm always looking forward to the next Around the Layout.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.